Oh, introductions. Hi, my name is Adri Perez. I am a transgender queer Chicanx activist in El Paso, Texas. I work for the ACLU of Texas as a local engagement specialist.
Okay. So, what are gender roles to you?
I hope you edit out the part where I laugh. What are gender roles to me? What are gender roles? What the gender roles are to me, or can you be more specific?
It's kind of like what you want to say about them.
What I
like,
want to say
what
about
are they
gender
to you?
roles?
Like, how do you interpret gender roles?
I think gender roles are what you know. I think gender roles are constructions of what we think people should be. And specifically, I think in society we've made it so that there's only two genders, right? Or I think specifically because of colonization, we made it so that there's only two genders that modern society or most of society views as the genders. So gender roles are the things that you have to do to be either male or female. And I think we're also in a time period where we're constructing what it means to be like non-binary, and also as a society trying to move away from like any sort of construction. But I think because we have existed in a society that gave us gender roles, that gave us like these frameworks to operate under, our natural inclination is to create another framework to work under. And I think that's what we've done for most of society, for most of the time that I have been in the LGBTQ community. Right, like we've constructed like what it means to be like androgynous, and that has been dominated by masculinity, really. So I think right now we're in like a time period where we're discovering what it means to be free of any framework. That's my answer.
What can we do to alleviate the pressure of this dichotomy on our society, young children, and people in the LGBT community?
What does dichotomy mean?
It's like what you were saying earlier. So it's like the male and the female. Like it's
binary?
Strictly, yeah.
Okay. I want to know how you're using dichotomy.
Yeah.
What can we do to alleviate the dichotomy? Yeah. It's one of the things that's like most shocking to me, I think, constantly, as a transgender queer person, is just how on a very basic level this world was not meant to include us, right? Like when you fill out a form, when I go to the dentist, when I go to the chiropractor, I have to give my sex, and as it is on my ID, which is female. I identify as non-binary. There is no like box that allows me to say like what my gender is or what my pronouns are, right? There is frequently no non-binary bathroom. We frequently organizations or groups have to decide that we're gonna take over the space and make it a non-binary or all gender bathroom, right? But it isn't that way institutionally. So I think it's important to start taking up space in these institutions as for all genders or for non-binary, trying to erase places where like single user bathrooms, it doesn't make sense for those to be gendered, right? That's a very easy switch. So I think it's important just to start taking up space and challenging institutions in the ways that they have created a binary and the ways that they perpetuate a binary. Even people that want to be LGBTQ friendly or people who consider themselves allies still perpetuate this sort of behavior. So I think that's one important way to challenge that dichotomy that would make a lasting difference. Also existing unapologetically as people.
What is the process of gender role development, and what things might hinder this progression?
I don't know what you mean by hinder the progression of gender roles, because I think like a progression is a progression, even if it looks like different for everybody. And I don't think there's like one way to have a gender role progression. Does that make sense?
We couldn't find the right word for that, so I just put progression. But like, I just mean like, what do you think could like make it more difficult?
Stall.
Like,
are you trying to say that it would make it more like so in that question, I think the implication is that like we're all trying to get to like queerness, right? Like that's what I'm interpreting from that question.
I kind of just mean general, like.
What could hinder that progression of gender roles?
Like, what could hinder someone like possibly starting to develop their gender role, like no matter like what they're.
I think immediately we start getting gender roles. Like I don't think there's anything in the world that like hinders us from developing an idea of gender roles. And I think that's very evident in the fact that people have gender reveal parties now. I think it's gotten more extreme now. I don't remember there being gender reveal parties when I was younger, but we would go to baby showers, and baby showers were gendered, right? Unless for some reason like they didn't want to decide the gender, and even then like the color for an ambiguous gender is yellow, right? So like I think we start assigning gender roles and expectations to people even before they're born. So I don't know if there's anything that really hinders it. I think what is hindered is the like autonomy to make your own decision about what your gender is. That's definitely hindered because it's just imposed on you from the minute you're born usually. Specifically for me, I was born and they pierced my ears. I didn't have any just like bodily autonomy to make that decision. Just the other day I was reading a conversation on Facebook where somebody was talking, there was like two moms talking about how there was two moms talking about this news article that had broken from a former Claire's employee. This Claire's employee had written an article online because her manager had told her to pierce this girl's ears even though this girl did not want to have her ears pierced. And her manager told her that in those situations, even if the girl doesn't want her ears pierced but her mom wants her ears to be pierced, that she had to do it. That's not the official Claire's company policy, as it turns out, but that is the story that this former employee wrote out. And the moms that were talking about it on Facebook were saying that they never pierced their daughter's ears because they wanted to wait until their daughter could make the decision to want to have her ears pierced. And it makes sense because there are also people that are involved with reproductive rights activism, which involves talking about people's bodily autonomy, right, to make decisions over their own body. So that's like a cool new progressive trend, right? But definitely when I was born, and I think for larger society, because I know like my family will continue to have children and will continue to carry on these traditions of just piercing female babies' ears when they're born, and putting them in pink dresses. All my childhood photos are me in pink. There's one above the door over there. I'm like in a dress, like sitting in a wicker chair, like holding a flower. It's very feminine, right? Like I'm 3 or 4 years old in that photo. I didn't like, and I knew that this is like what I had to be. And then the minute that you deviate from that, right, you are punished in some way, or you're told that you're doing something wrong. So it's very rigid in that way. Like you are given these expectations, you are forced into them before you can make decisions for yourself, I think. And then if you have autonomy and choose to like deviate from those, that behavior is then corrected by whoever is enforcing those gender roles, usually your parents. And schools, right, teachers do that all the time as well. Like these systems that we exist in, right? Because we see our families and then we see teachers for like the first 18 years of our life. And then our friends, I mean, we're all in a school system where these gender roles are being enforced, right? So most of us like learn to accept this as normal. No, there's very few people, I think, that push back or question authority enough at an early age to get like a different perspective in schools, unfortunately. I definitely grew up like in a school where I was the one that was always challenging authority. And this also might be specific because I did go to like a private Catholic school. Uniforms. Sorry, that's like another thing, right? Like, you're given uniforms, and the girls wear skirts and dresses and like jumpers, and you're not allowed to wear shorts, or you are allowed to wear shorts, but only until 5th grade, which is like when puberty hits, which is so interesting. And like the boys wear pants. What else? So like uniforms enforce this. I went to a small private school where everybody except for me seemed to have a lot more respect for their parents than I did. And one of the beatitudes is literally to like honor your mother and father and like respect authority. So people wouldn't push back or challenge as much, I think, in my school. And I, from an early age, I think didn't have any respect for parents or authority. And so I was always pushing back on everything. But if it wasn't for that, like I don't know if I would be where I am today. As quickly as I think I did it. And I didn't do it as quickly as like some people have, right? It also, I think, requires you could always push back on gender roles, but to know like that you are transgender, or to know that there is an alternative way to be, you have to have been exposed to that alternative way to be, so that you can like name it, identify it, and communicate it to somebody, right? I, at 8 years old, could never tell my mom that I was transgender because I had no idea what that was. So again, like, pushing back on like these institutions that uphold like gender roles is super important. Also, having a lot of visibility for people that are not either male or female, people who are non-binary, people who are gender fluid, people who are gender queer, people who have a gender identity that with like a fluid gender expression, like that's so important. And to have those conversations is really important, right? Because people can like exist in this way, but then never describe it to somebody, right? And then that might leave like a gap in which that person cannot ask like the persons that are available to them what their gender was. Does that make sense? I'm like imagining scenarios where if I was like a child and I saw somebody who was like gender fluid or didn't look like what I expected a person to look like based on the gender roles that I had constructed in my head. And if I had asked my mom who that person was, my mom would be like, shrug, and I would never know anything different. You look so sad right now.
Why?
I don't know, you just look sad. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you ready for the last question?
Sure.
Okay. How does identifying as LGBT change your gender role development?
How? I don't know. I read that question and I was like, I don't know. My gender role development? How does identifying as LGBTQ change your gender role development? I think it's part of my gender role development. That's an answer. So it is part of my gender role development. Did my gender role development come first, or did identifying as LGBTQ come first? That's what I don't know. So I came out like as bisexual the same day I cut off all my hair. And I don't remember having this level of self-awareness like at all when I was 17 years old. But I came out as bisexual, I cut off all my hair, and then I went home and at like 12 a.m. typed up a Tumblr blog post where some of my high school friends followed me and wrote in that Tumblr blog post that I cut off all my hair to more closely look like the gender that I felt inside. I had maybe been on Tumblr for, at that point, like 9 months, and Tumblr was like what first exposed me to queer people, to like what happy, fulfilled queer people could look like, and to what happy, like fulfilled transgender people could look like. People who were starting their transitions, people who are now like very famous YouTube stars for being transgender, were transitioning in that time, and they were posting videos about their story, and so that was like their first time that I was exposed to those things. And then I came out as bisexual, I guess the same day that I came out as transgender. But even in that moment, I didn't use that word because I didn't feel comfortable. Because at the time, this is actually answers your question. At the time, the only way for me to have been transgender was for me to accept and start hormones. Accept that I wanted to like be on hormone replacement therapy and start hormones. The only way to be transgender at that time, or if it felt like it, was to start hormones. That was the only way that you would be trans enough or like be validated as a transgender person. So eventually I did start hormones when I was 17 when I came out as bisexual and transgender, though not explicitly. And then I started hormones when I was right before my 21st birthday. That's 4 years. I don't know, the LGBTQ community, like, what I wanted to say is that the LGBTQ community imposes its own like gender expectations of what queer people should look like, and be, and it changes with like generations and yearly probably. But I initially, when I came out as bisexual and transgender, and then a month later I came out as a lesbian. And so then my gender identity was defined by being a lesbian. So you had to be like a butch, or you had to be like a femme. And I was somewhere in between. And so then my friend at the time, who had been out for like 2 years now in high school, was like, "You're a futch." So she just like put the two words together. And that was my gender, which involved, like, that was my gender identity. And I took that and I owned it, and I was like, I'm gonna wear flannel and I'm gonna have a boy haircut, but I'm also gonna wear makeup still. And I did that for probably 3 years, I think. I wore Target flannel and had short boy hair like Justin Bieber, and would wear makeup. And then at some point I realized that I like accepted my like trans identity, or accepted that I didn't want to be as femme. I don't know, actually. Like, I don't know if I ever decided I didn't want to be as femme. It's weird to like have to look on your past from where you're like sitting now, right? Because now I identify as non-binary. And I started hormones, and hormones felt really great for a really long time. And then the masculinity of it all like feels a little bit uncomfortable as someone who spent 21 years as not identifying as a woman, but being perceived as a woman, right? So like you get all that female socialization, and that's how you exist in the world, even if you don't want to, even if sometimes it's like a really miserable existence because people are misgendering you. And so now that I have been like existing as like people perceive me as a man sometimes, sometimes I still get misgendered, but most of the time people perceive me as a man. It's weird to like reflect back on wanting to be more masculine when now I don't want to be that masculine. So I think overall, like, gender roles are just restricting and oppressive for everybody, and it's all like uncomfortable, unfortunately. And we're all like, I just wish that we didn't have to conform to this. But even then, like, I attribute like the oppression of gender roles a lot to colonization, because before colonization, I think there were a lot of Native American tribes who had people that were gender fluid, or like who would deviate from the typical gender roles. But even within Native American cultures, there's there's gender roles and there's traditions and things that you have to adhere to. For example, as part of like my indigenous spirituality, women always have to wear skirts. And the men are like the fire keepers, and I in that space exist as a non-binary person, and so I'm just like given the flexibility to do whatever I want, which is really cool. But still, like, we are like in this binary, even in that tradition, right, where it's just me for some reason that has this like, well, me because transgender people are seen as having a higher capacity for spiritual connection. So I'm allowed to like flow freely between the two gender roles and like mix and match traditions as I want. But even there, like, I'm still restricted between this like binary, right? So.
Is there anything else you want to say on this topic?
Gender roles are trash. They are.
They are.
They really, really are. And even like, it's so hard to like exist as your full self all the time, right? Because like we still need to survive under capitalism and have jobs, and we need to survive under capitalism because we need to have a job and we need to buy food and we need to like provide shelter for ourselves. So we can't like. I work for a fairly progressive organization, but I still can't go to work with like makeup on my face, and it's not because my employer has a problem with it, it's because I'm working in a society that would have a problem with it, right? So even when we have like supportive employers, and my job is working in the community specifically, right? So like, yes, I could wear a dress to work if I was like sitting in the office all day, but if I wear a dress to work and then I go out into the community, I don't know, I guess I could do that, and I'm afraid of like the organization getting like backlash in some way. So that's weird. I don't know, it's hard to be queer. And it's like, and I always like, it's so much harder for trans women, right? Like, people are straight up just like murdering people because they don't adhere to their gender roles. Like, that's wild. I'm scratching my face. I can say that again. You're not gonna like put me scratching. People are getting murdered for like being who they are. That's depressing. I feel like I hope Catherine was like more uplifting.
She was